Good evening, dear friends. Shavua Tov, or as we say in Yiddish, Gut Woch. So, the good news is that we're going to wrap up all the parshiot until now, and even already touch upon the parsha of the coming week, which is Vayera. And I apologize for some small lapses here and there, but I'm going to try to make it up now by presenting a topic which will actually tie together all the parshiot, Breishit, Noach, Lech Lecha, and even Vayera, and on a theme which is of keen interest to everybody, and that is the theme of love. We're going to use these four parshiot, including the four important biblical figures, as a tool for understanding how the Torah defines what love is, how it should be applied, and what it should be. There was once a great mathematician, and he was passionate about math to the extent that his wife began to doubt his devotion to her. And he says to her, "Darling, what do you love more? Surely you love your math more than you love me." He says, "Oh, no, not at all. I love you more." And to this the wife says, "Give me a proof. Prove it." And the husband responds, "Well, if R is a set of all possible loved objects," and so on. So this is something I think all people are deeply involved with, because on the one hand, man is generally by nature selfish. We tend to look at things in terms of our own interests. But on the other hand, we want to receive love, and we know that it involves a mutual commitment. And I'm not talking about necessarily romantic love or between a husband and wife or a man and a woman, but just in general, this whole concept. And so love, first of all, in the understanding of the Torah, is the ability to step outside one's own identity and to engage and take a sincere interest in somebody else. The word for love in Hebrew is ahava, and there are a number of ways of explaining it, but one of them focuses on the middle letters, hav, which means to give. Essentially, loving is giving. The Torah looks at loving as an act. It is not a passive state. It is not a state of infatuation. It is an act which we need to inculcate and repeat. And this act presumes that we care about other people, meaning that their fate, their life, their material, spiritual, and moral existence is of interest to us. Material is clear. When we give to people, we do acts of loving kindness. We give food to the hungry, clothing to those without, and so on, shelter. But the Torah puts a big emphasis on their spiritual welfare as well. There is a verse in the Torah, Hochiach, Tochiach et amitecha. You should surely reproach your neighbor. Reproach means to tell him what he's doing wrong. The verse does say, "Velotisa alal chet," you should not bear sin because of him, which has two meanings. One is that if you don't tell him what he's doing wrong, then you share in his misdeed. You become like an accomplice. So Judaism does not entirely embrace the idea of live and let live. We are supposed to be active. We're supposed to be communicating with others about what they are doing wrong. But warning, do not carry a sin because of him, can also mean something else. Can also mean that we have to be very careful and gentle and cautious as to how we correct other people to be done in a way which always conveys first and foremost a true, sincere interest in their well-being and not just our interest to show off or to boss over them. But however you understand it, teaching others or exposing them to the truth of a situation or the truth of a teaching is part of love. And this is the part we will now speak about. Now, there's an early biblical figure. He lived some 600 years after the creation of the world. There was a lot of longevity then. We know about these, long lives, Methuselah. I'm not going to go into the science of it. But our protagonist, Hanoch, died young. Poor guy. He died at a mere 365 years old, which at that time was not old. What happened? It says that God took him. Why did God take him? And all of a sudden he was not there. So Rashi explains, based on the Talmud, that although idolatry was widespread, and although Hanoch resisted this and remained faithful and true to the one God and was a righteous man, nonetheless, he was not involved in influencing his society, and quite to the contrary, he was vulnerable to being influenced himself to do the wrong thing. One Talmudic explanation has him actually dwelling in a cave. And so this figure of Hanoch represents a person who on the good side did take interest and had ambitions to better himself spiritually and morally, but did not take an interest in others. By the way, the lack of interest in others is a function to a certain extent of his other weakness, which was that he would be influenced. When we're active in trying to express outwardly knowledge that can benefit others, we then protect ourselves in a sense and inoculate ourselves against the threat of being negatively influenced by them. Indeed, there is an explanation in Kashrut which illustrates this. When we want to get the blood out of the meat, we put salt on it. And there's a rule which tells us that a piece of meat that is salted will not absorb blood from another piece of meat, because since its activity presently is in pushing out and giving, it will not be susceptible to receiving something inappropriate. So one of the ways we remain strong in our convictions is by trying to teach others, always in a humble way, in a way that doesn't imply that we are somehow better. But in any case, this is what Hanoch did not do, and hence his life ended briefly. As it's explained, Hashem didn't want this one righteous man to go off the straight path. But Hanoch is our first example, righteous but not involved with others, not expressing love in this dimension to those in his surroundings.